Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley. Thanks for joining me today. In this month's edition of the Ellen Hudson newsletter, I thought I would experiment with a little no-line coloring. It's a technique I've actually never done before, but when I saw the new Ink on 3 ink pads, I thought I would give it a shot. So here's a look at the trio of Ink on 3 ink pads that are available. This one is the Black Detail Hybrid Ink Pad. It's waterproof, Copic friendly, archival, acid free, all those good things. And it is a part of this group of 3, or each of these pads is available individually. Now, Ink on 3 also makes the Juicy Embossing Pad. This is a embossing ink, so it's a clear, sticky ink. It also does a watermark effect, very similar to the Versamark ink. I have not compared them side by side, so I haven't gotten the chance to do that. But the ink pad I'm focusing on today is this one here, and this is the Fadeout No Line Coloring Ink Pad here. Now, I'm going to talk to you a bit more about this ink pad as I'm doing the coloring. I wanted to show you the stamps I'll be using today. These are the Unicorns and Rainbows stamp set from the July release from the Essentials by Ellen line, designed by Julie Ebersole. I just love these. And I'm starting out by inking up my images with the Fade Out No Line Coloring ink pad. Now you're going to see my unicorn on the left there is pretty dark compared to the clouds. That's because my stamp was dirty. So after giving my stamp a good cleaning, you'll see what this ink actually looks like when you stamp it. Now I'm stamping this onto some smooth Bristol as well as some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock because I'm using different types of cardstocks for the different types of coloring mediums. As always, your cardstock is important to your coloring process. So for Copic coloring, I like to use the Neenah Solar White. And for water-based markers like these Zig Art and Graphic twin markers, I like to use the Smooth Bristol or the Bristol Smooth cardstock, however you want to say it. So that's what I am doing here. I have the Bristol Smooth cardstock. I've dampened my paper just a tiny bit with a damp brush. And now I'm kind of tracing along the lines with my pink marker here. I'm making some pink clouds. And then I'm going back in with a water brush and just kind of blending out the edges. Now, I told you I would talk to you a little bit more about this ink, and here's where that comes in. This ink is designed for no-line coloring. So this ink is designed to pick up the color that you lay over it. So when you are coloring your images, you want to make sure that you actually go over the lines. I'm not talking outside of the lines, but you do want to bring the color over the lines so that that line that you've stamped can pick up the ink color or the coloring medium that you have placed over it. And that's kind of how the magic happens and it disappears. So you can see now I am still using the Zig Art and Graphic twin markers, but this time I've taken a piece of acetate, I've laid it over just another piece of white cardstock, and I've scribbled my markers onto that acetate, and I'm picking them up with the blender pen now. This works much the same as using the water brush that I just used. This blender pen is kind of nice. I'm not sure what the difference is chemically between a water brush and this blender pen. I just find that I have really good control with the blender pen, and it works really well on this Bristol Smooth cardstock. So you're going to see me here. I'm grabbing my color off of this makeshift palette here, and I'm just going in and coloring in the images that I've stamped. Now, you may not be able to see the lines very well on camera, but I can see them fine in person, and I think you will be able to also. And while the lines look pretty dark when they're wet, when the color is wet over the top, they do kind of absorb that color and kind of fade back as your piece kind of dries and sets for a little while. So as you're working through your project, you're kind of thinking, I'm not real sure about this, but give it some time and it actually does do wonders. Now, I'm going to admit I've never done no line coloring before, and I felt like for some reason you had to have like the special artistic talent to be able to use it to do this technique. And that's kind of why I've shied away from it. But I have to say, I found it very easy. Now, this ink pad is also designed to kind of leave you with the details. So because that line absorbs the color, you're not going to lose the details of your stamped images. In other words, when you color over them, you're still going to have like the little lines and the accents in there. You're not going to lose those completely because the line is not going to wash away. It's simply going to absorb the color and kind of fade out, which is different than using like a distress ink, because the distress ink, you're actually going to blend that and move it out. Whereas this is actually going to stay in place, absorb the color, and kind of fade out, if that makes any sense. Now, this ink is waterproof, it's acid-free, it's archival, and it is also Copic friendly. So you can do this no-line coloring technique not only with water-based markers like these Zig Art and Graphic Twins or the Clean Color Real Brush markers or even Distress markers, but you can do this with Copic markers as well. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a project using Copic markers as well so that you can kind of see the difference, because it does give you a little bit different look. Now, this kind of technique I'm doing here with the blender pen and the Art and Graphic Twin markers, this is going to give me a more kind of watercolor look, whereas the Copic markers are going to give me a more solid and dense color look, if that makes sense. Now, I've colored my rainbow, and I'm going to go in and start coloring my unicorn here. I'm using a warm gray marker to kind of go around the edges of this unicorn so that it has a little bit of shading around the edges. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm making sure that my color is kind of brought over the top of that line that I stamped, not outside the lines, but over the top, so that that line can kind of grab that color. So I'm going to just finish up my coloring here of these with the Zig Art and Graphic Twins. You can kind of see the result there, and those lines are going to fade back more as this piece kind of sets up. And now I'm going to move on to my images here, and I'm going to color these with Copic markers. They're stamped on some Neenah Solar White. I'm not doing any shading with Copic markers. I'm going in and laying down a flat color over all of these images. And I want to remind you, you don't always have to do like 18 colors of shading with your Copic markers. They're great for flat color as well. So you can see the images on the right there are colored with Copics. The images on the left are with the Zig Art and Graphic Twin. And now I have this Midas Touch shimmer pen from Nuvo, and I am going to use that to color over my horns on my unicorn. I couldn't show you that because my head got in the way, so I had to cut that out, but I just kind of colored over the unicorn horns. Now, for this piece that I colored with the Art and Graphic Twins, I kind of wanted to deepen the lines that are along the rainbow and some of those lines in the images. So I went back with the fine tip of those markers and kind of traced along some of those lines. And now I'm taking the coordinating dies, I'm holding them in place with a little delicate surface painter's tape, and I'm going to run those through my Gemini Junior to die cut those, and you can see them up on the top right of my screen. Now for my card front, I'm just going to create a little backdrop and stamp my sentiment onto some linen cardstock from the Essentials by Ellen line. You can see I'm using my Misty Creative Corners to make sure that my sentiment is lined up straight on my card front. And I'm going to pick this up using the front of my Misty. That backdrop is from the Wonky Backdrop stamp set. It is one that I use so much. And you're going to see it's a really easy way to create a backdrop on the front of your card, kind of a grounding place for images just like I have today. And I'm going to stamp this in kind of a multicolored pattern here. So I'm using some Distress Oxide inks for this. I am using Faded Jeans, Broken China, and Cracked Pistachio. And I'm actually putting them onto my stamp using my blending tool. This is going to give me a softer look than if I take the ink directly to the stamp itself. And you're going to see I'm going to add those just kind of in lines, and then I'm going to go back over some of those areas where they intersect and just kind of blend it out a little bit more with the blending tool. And you're going to see the result I'm left with here. I didn't get pressure evenly on all of those areas, but I think the result is really beautiful. And you can see I actually stamped the sentiment there using the black detail ink from the Ink on 3 stamp pad set there. So that's a nice deep dark rich black that you can use for sentiments as well. That's waterproof and Copic friendly. So this time I kind of changed up the colors here. I used Mermaid Lagoon in the middle, and I still wasn't loving this combination of blues and greens. I left it in there because when I look back at it, I think it's beautiful, but something about it, I just wanted something different. So I'm using the same technique, but different colors of Distress Oxide inks for this technique. So I'm using the Tattered Rose on the bottom and the Abandoned Coral in the middle, and at the top, the Picked Raspberry. I'm going to tell you, I love the way that Tattered Rose and Abandoned Coral blend together. My favorite blend of Distress Oxide inks, by far, Tattered Rose and Abandoned Coral. And once I get those blended onto my stamp, I am going to stamp this onto my card front once again. I missed a little area there at the top, so I'm just going to close it back and press it down so I get good coverage. And you can see I have my little backdrop created there. Super easy way to blend inks on your stamp. So those were the two color combos side by side. I decided to go with the pink corally combinations. And I'm just going to kind of arrange my little stamped and die cut elements here. I'm adding some foam tape onto the back of these images, and then I'm just placing them over that kind of stamped backdrop area and placing them onto my card. And I'm going to tell you that this is this is about as one layer as my cards get here. I'm stamping right onto the card base. I'm putting a little bit of foam adhesive behind those stamped images, but this is about as one layer as I can stand. I really like to have a lot of dimension on my cards. So to add a little bit of sparkle to these cards, I am using my Marvy Yukaita Jewel Picker to pick up these little iridescent clear stars from High Supply. And I'm attaching them using a little bit of the collage medium. And I'm going to add a little bit of sparkle using the Tonic Nouveau Aqua Shimmer Pen. This has become my favorite shimmer pen of all of the shimmer pens for right now. I'm sure I kind of tend to go back and forth, but I really love the brush on this one and the shimmer that it gives. So there you have it. I finished the cards off with just a little bit of gold threaded twine at the top. Just kept it really simple so that the focus could stay on that beautiful little backdrop that I created and these fun images with that no line coloring technique. And I really think some of these up close detail shots give you a good idea how that ink kind of just really absorbs the color that you put over top of it and kind of just fades out into the background and gives you that really fun, soft, no line coloring look. Now here's an up close look at the images that I colored with the Copic markers. It gives you a different look, but it works just as well. And I love that this ink is compatible with all different types of coloring mediums like watercolors, water-based markers, Copic markers, and even colored pencils. As always, I will have links to the featured products in the description at YouTube, but head on over to the coordinating blog post. I'll have it linked below. Over there, I'll have more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies that I used in these projects. And here's a little look at a bonus project that I created using the new Inner Mermaid stamp set from the July release as well. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video with a look at the Ink on 3 Fade Out No Line Coloring Ink Pad. I hope you enjoyed these projects, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are my favorite. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.